and analyze, your approach, process, make a plan, make a safe plan, have your escape route also planned, and be able to execute that safely and hopefully flawlessly. But really what I give you tonight needs to be reinforced with practice out on the water. So tonight's webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the Navionics website. So if at any time you want to go back and listen to it again, if you really love to listen to me talk, you can go ahead and do that, but really reinforce it on the water, practice these things over and over, starting out in open water and then kind of confining yourself down into the restricted channels and things like that where you're in tighter quarters. So the outline for tonight, we're going to start with docking under sail. We'll go with the upwind approach first. Usually try to advocate the upwind approach as much as possible. It's easier in that you can control your speed. You can speed up, you can slow down. So it's one of the more safer approaches. Then we'll talk about the beam reach approach, which is doable, but usually when you can approach on the beam reach, you can tuck into the corner and get an upwind approach at the very end. So beam reach approaches, you'll probably do that less often. And then we'll finish with the dreaded downwind approach. So approaching, dock is downwind of you, and you have to basically go on a run downwind to it. So we'll talk about a way to make that a little bit safer and a little bit better. Then we'll move into docking under power. So we'll talk about the prop walk phenomenon. So how to use that to your advantage instead of making it your enemy when you're trying to approach a dock. And then we'll go through docking alongside and docking in a slip. Again, just going through kind of techniques, process, and then you really just need to reinforce out on the water. And then we'll finish up with some useful maneuvers. So the back and fill technique, which is a neat way to turn around in a very narrow channel without making any forward progress. You basically pivot the boat right around the middle of the channel. We'll talk through springing off of the dock and then the best way to back out of a slip in a crosswind, because that can kind of be a big enemy, especially for new sailors. And then we'll finish up with the question and answer. So docking under sail. So we'll start with kind of, I listed them out in steps, but kind of just general pointers, applies to both under sail and under power. But before you even attempt to approach the dock, the first thing you should do is know your boat. How quickly can you jibe the boat? How quickly can you tack the boat? If you throw the tiller over or turn the wheel, is there a delay in the helm? So, if you panic and you just throw the tiller over, is there like a 3-second delay before the boat actually starts to turn, or is it pretty immediate? In the same aspect, how long does it take the boat to stop? So you're only under sail, you can't put the boat in reverse to stop you or slow you down. So you really need to know, my boat's really big and heavy, so it carries its momentum much farther than, say, a little dinghy. So knowing those things is going to be key. When you're stopping, you can either point the bow into the wind to stop, but then you can also just ease your sails out, let them go out over the beam of the boat, which is essential for the beam reach approach. So knowing kind of stopping time for those two scenarios. And then knowing your crew. So that's a big one. If your crew is on the ball, you sail with them all the time, they should be able to douse their sails really quickly. So maybe you can save that step for the last minute. But, maybe they're a newer crew. You've got, less strict sailors. Maybe you just went out for a sunset cruise. Maybe you want to plan ahead, douse sails earlier, maybe approach only under jib or only under main to reduce power. So once you know all that, you have that in the back of your mind, you want to analyze the conditions. So are you going to be fighting tighter current? Is it going to be with you? That's going to be a big factor when you're trying to stop the boat. So if the boat stops in 3 boat lengths, but you're moving with the tide, it might take a little bit longer for your boat to stop, might be a little bit harder to stop. So knowing that's key. And then knowing where you're going in the marina. So, if it's the same slip you sail into every time, or if you're just tying up to the same spot in the dock every time, then you should be pretty good with kind of the local knowledge. But say you're sailing into a new marina for the first time and you want to tie up for lunch, knowing what's available, what the dock orientation to the wind is, so that you can start to plan your approach. Step 3 is kind of a big one that people usually look over, but is pretty key for approaching under sail, and that's planning your escape route. So, you're making your approach, but say, I don't know, your bowman messes up and doesn't have the bow line attached yet. Maybe instead of trying to rush it and get that all sorted out, just tack back around, head back out, get everything sorted, and then make a second approach. But you don't want that escape plan to put you, too close to rocks, too close to other boats. You want to be able to maneuver yourself safely away in case the reason you're turning around is much worse. Step 4 there is prep the boat. So after you have your plan in place, you're ready to go, prep the boat, tie off your fenders, get your dock lines ready and sorted, tie it off to the cleats on the boat. If you have a roaming fender, that's a great addition. So, if you're trying to maneuver the boat into a tight corner, you can have your roaming fender, move it around, pop it in, just to protect the boat and kind of docks and other boats. And then step 5 there is once everything's ready to go, it's time to make your approach and give it your best shot. And the last bullet I have there is slow as pro. So there's no reason to approach the dock at full speed. It's not necessary at all. It puts your crew in danger, puts your boat in danger, puts you in danger. So as slow as possible, while still, making forward progress. And so the ideal speed as you come alongside the dock is going to be like a walking pace, enough so that your crew doesn't have to jump off the boat and then wrestle the dock lines back to stop you, enough that they can just step off and easily bring your boat to a stop. So I've got some pretty awesome screenshots of the maps here. I just wanted to use, something that already had a dock in place rather than making clip art bonanza. Okay, so sailing in the upwind approach is very much like sailing onto a mooring. It's my recommended approach if it's an option that's available to you in the marina, since it's very easy to control your speed. So what I would recommend for the process is to furl your jib or drop your jib down to the deck and approach only under mainsail. So that's going to help increase your visibility. Now you can see up around the bow area, especially as you're coming into the dock. That's going to be really important. And you just don't need that much power as you approach the dock. So starting down at point 1 down here, we're going to be making the approach on a close reach. Again, jib is furled, so we're only under mainsail. And we're going to be aiming about a boat length away from where we want to end up. So this X at point number 2 is going to be kind of where we start to aim as we get closer and closer to the dock. We're going to keep trimming our sails to maintain some forward speed. If we start to gain too much speed, we can feather up into the wind, luff the sails a little bit, slow the boat down. We just want to get that ideal close to walking pace as we get closer and closer to the dock. As we come alongside the dock at point number 2, we'll head the boat up into the wind, and we'll use the windage against the boat to slow us down and stop us at point number 3, which is our final docking position. So you'll want a crewman positioned, usually recommend right at the shrouds, so that when they step off, they can hold on to the shrouds. With a dock line in hand, they can step off, secure the boat, and then get all the other dock lines prepped. So upwind approach is going to be close reach, aim 1 boat length beyond, turn up into the wind, let the windage against the boat, let the sails luff, stop the boat, step off. Okay, so the beam reach approach. So like I said earlier, when you're approaching on a beam reach, you could probably approach in an upwind at the end, but let's talk through the beam reach. It's going to be this very similar to the upwind approach to start. So you'll again approach close reach, using the sails to trim, maintain your speed, feather up if you have too much speed. Coming in, again, aim about 1 boat length from where you want to stop, maybe a little bit farther on this one. And as you come into the dock, you want to ease your sails all the way. So let them go all the way out parallel, so that as the wind comes over, your sails just luff completely, don't fill up, you'll stop the boat. I don't recommend pointing the bow up into the wind, into the dock, because you're putting a very narrow portion of your boat right at the dock that someone has to step off onto the dock from. So it's very dangerous for your crew. Your visibility is going to be very poor. So judging how far you are from the dock, it's very easy to just plow right into it, damage your bow stem, which is never any good. So I would advise against that, which is why we want to make the turn, go parallel to the dock, let the sails all the way out, let them luff to stop the boat. So in this scenario, like I was saying before, hopefully you could try to make the upwind approach. So maybe a better approach in this case would be to come alongside the dock, maybe position your boat farther over here, make the approach and feather up and try to land on a dock that's pointed more upwind. So that might be a little bit safer if you can maneuver that way. But the beam reach approach is just as doable. So this is my favorite, the downwind approach. So this screenshot is actually the J-Roll dock here on Shelter Island in San Diego that we sail into, and the wind direction that I have drawn up on the corner of the screen is actually generally the prevailing wind that we see. So anytime we come in for a day sail, we're going to be doing a downwind approach to get back onto the dock, which is usually pretty terrifying for all the first timers. But it's actually quite controlled if you do it with this method. So what we usually do, because the wind does pick up in the afternoon, best way to approach is with just your jib or with no sails at all. So drop your mainsail, get it out of the way. I recommend only the jib because it's so much smaller and you're depowered, and then if it's on a furler, it's really easy to furl up. So if you drop your mainsail and you're still carrying a lot of speed forward, furl the jib and just let, again, the windage on the hull push you along downwind. So process here is, we'd sail in from San Diego Bay, start to go on the run, we drop our mainsail down on the deck, only have our jib out, maybe we have a little bit too much speed, furl the jib. So now when we get to point 2, we're under bare poles, so no sails at all. You'll notice your speed will decrease pretty quickly because you don't have that push effect from the wind. So you're basically just drifting down the channel. If you gain too much speed, you can do some S-curves, so kind of steer a little bit erratically around. If you have a lot of speed, maybe you do a full 360, come back. And as you get closer and closer to the dock, since you don't have sails up, you want to make sure you land on the dock in some regard. So here in San Diego, this area here is all rocks. So you can tell if we miss the dock, we're going to end up on rocks. That's never good. So as we start to get closer and closer, I'll start to aim the bow more and more onto the dock, so at least we get some footprint of the boat on the dock. And as you turn the boat, you will keep getting pushed down in this direction, but the boat will have traction from the keel and the rudder, so you will move in that direction as you turn the boat. So steer your S-curve, slow the boat down, start to aim more and more in toward the dock, and then if you really want to kill all your speed really quickly, throw your tiller over, or throw the wheel over, turn the boat as quickly as you can. That'll basically stall your foils and stop the boat dead right next to the dock, and then you just step off and tie yourself off. So this one can be nerve-wracking, but it's fairly straightforward. Position yourself just upwind of the dock, drop your sails, furl your jib, and just let the boat drift down under the windage and steer into the dock. Okay, so that covers kind of the main docking approaches you'd see under sail typically. There are some oddballs. If you have questions with anything specifically, feel free to shoot me an email. But we'll move into the docking under power section now. So again, we'll start off with kind of the steps, the general notes that we have, and they're pretty similar to the docking under sail notes. So again, know your boat. What's the turn radius of your boat? Again, is there a delay on the helm? Is there a delay when your engine's engaged? Maybe it takes a little bit of time to accelerate or decelerate, especially if you have a much heavier boat. Again, analyze the conditions, tide current, what slip are you going to, what dock are you going to, Are there crosswinds present that are going to blow the bow away, blow the boat off the dock? Basically, any environmental considerations, you need to think through those. So step 3, now you have an engine, so the escape route is maybe a little less important, but it's still something that you should be thinking about. So again, if you have to bail, make sure you're not bailing onto rocks, onto other boats. Once all of that's processed and you have it in your mind, step 4 is to, again, prep the boat, top your fenders, dock lines ready, make sure your crew is prepped. And then step 5 is, of course, make your approach. And the same as the under sail approach, as slow as possible. There's no reason to rev it up full speed just to get into the dock. Nice and slow, nice and controlled is how you want to approach. Okay, so let's go into prop walk. So everyone's favorite. I can talk for a while about prop walk, but I tried to simplify it down as much as possible. But it's basically the tendency of a turning propeller to pivot the back of the boat side to side. And the direction the boat will pivot depends on the direction of the rotation of the propeller. And then depending on your hull shape and your propeller parameters, it could be more severe than it is on other boats. So it's really boat dependent, propeller dependent. So more noticeable for boats at slower speeds and in reverse gear, just because your rudder is not counteracting the effect as much as it would in forward gear. So, if you're motoring along in the marina and forward, you probably won't notice it as much. But if you're, in a very close quartered situation trying to get into a slip is when prop walk will sneak up on you and could possibly ruin your day if you're not aware of it. So step 1 is to determine whether you have a left-handed propeller or a right-handed propeller. So it's usually, if your boat's up on a trailer, you could just take a look at your prop. It might be stamped on there. But basically, right-handed propellers will spin clockwise when you're looking at the boat from astern, and then left-handed props will spin counterclockwise, or so the top of the blade comes over to the left when it's in forward gear. But let's say that you keep your boat in a slip, and you don't necessarily feel like jumping in the water and checking out your prop. The best way to do it is stay tied up to the dock, put your engine in reverse, and throttle up slightly, not enough to tear out your docking cleats, but just throttle up slightly and just watch over the back of the boat for the wake, the prop wash, and just check out what side of the boat the prop wash comes out on. So if it's on the starboard side, you're going to have a right-handed propeller, and if the prop wash comes out on the port side, you're going to have a left-handed propeller. So a right-handed propeller in reverse is going to pivot the boat to the port side. Left-handed propeller will be the opposite of that. So in reverse, it's going to pivot to starboard. So, if you have a right-handed prop, you're approaching at a dock, you're going to take it port 2. You can come into the dock, throttle into reverse, but basically idle speed, and you can use the prop walk to tuck the stern back in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you always want to try to use prop walk to your advantage when you're docking. So let's start with docking alongside, and this will make use of the prop walk. So process, we have boat 1 down here making the approach. So they've already prepped the boat, they planned their escape route, they know crosswinds are present. Let's say this is ideal conditions, so no current, no big crosswinds, fairly benign weather this day. So they're making the approach in. You want to approach on about a 40-degree angle. You can get away with 35 to 45. I usually just say 40, easy to remember. So you come in at about a 40-degree angle to the dock. Aim, because now you have your reverse gear to stop you. You can aim maybe a half boat length from where you actually want to stop. So that's the X on point 2 here. So let's see if I can get my drawing tool. So we're making the approach in on about a 45, aiming about a half boat length from where you want to go. As we get closer and closer to the dock, we'll slow the boat down, maybe take a touch in reverse to keep us going as slow as possible. And as we start to make the turn, we want kind of the bow quarter, again, to touch the dock, because remember, we're going to have a crew standing right up around the shrouds there to step off. So we want kind of that area to touch the dock, and hopefully that's where you've put your forward fender. So you touch the fender rather than touching your hull. And right after your crew steps off, pop the boat in reverse to stop it. And then once the boats come to a stop, just idle in reverse and use the prop walk to walk the stern of the boat into the dock. So now in this situation, as I've drawn it, we would use prop walk to pivot the stern to starboard into this direction. So obviously this would only be helpful if we had a left-handed prop, because a left-handed prop in reverse will pivot the stern to starboard. But what if we don't have a left-handed prop? What if we have a right-handed prop? So we would just make the approach the opposite way and dock port side too, but same process. So hopefully that makes sense. Docking in a slip. I don't have too much on this because it can be fairly straightforward unless your conditions are really blustery, and we'll talk about that, I think, the last slide. But again, you want to make your approach, stay toward the far side of the fairway, just to give you some nice ample room to make the turn. You never really want to make a sharp 90 turn as much as you may want to. You really want to use the drift of the boat to come to the stop. The only thing to be aware of on this side as you get closer and closer to the fairway is your stern swing. So as the boat pivots, your stern will swing out toward all the boats stocked up over here. So you just want to be aware of how much stern swing your specific boat has. So we make the approach on the far side of the fairway, come in, slow the boat down as we get closer and closer. We'll start our turn, and maybe we'll aim, basically where we want the stern to end up is where we'll initially aim as we make the turn, and then kind of just move in farther and farther, that reference point, closer and closer in on the dock as we continue to make the turn. So again, remember that there are no brakes, so you're going to put the boat in reverse to stop, but if we reverse and then go to kind of an idle reverse, remember that there will be prop walk. So although you're kind of tucked in between finger docks, your stern will pivot and could hit that. So you want to make sure you have a roaming fender around, or just have your proper fender set. Usually bow quarter, midship, and you can have a stern quarter. If you find that you have a lot of trouble stopping the boat or keeping the boat alongside the dock when you stop and go in reverse, as you come into the dock, kind of where I've drawn this X, maybe there'll be a piling or a cleat. As you come in, drop a spring line around that, and then you can use the spring line and throttle against the spring line to stop the boat and draw it in towards the dock. Okay, so finish up with some useful maneuvers here. So the back and fill maneuver is my favorite because I think it's the most eye-opening. When we teach out on the water, a lot of people haven't heard of it, have never tried it. But this maneuver really makes use of the prop walk phenomenon to help you turn without, a big driving three-point turn. So most ideal in a very narrow channel, but you can do it anywhere. And you're basically pivoting the boat around one point, without having to traverse across the fairway in that marina 8,000 times. So I'll walk through the process for the right-handed prop boats. It's the same process for the left-handed propeller, just the opposite direction. So you'd start on the other side of the fairway, turn the boat the other way, but the process is still the same. So with the right-handed propeller, we're going to want to turn the boat to starboard because our stern in reverse is going to kick to port. Hopefully that makes sense now. So start along starboard side, or port side of the fairway, and then turn the boat to starboard. So whether you have a tiller or a wheel, turn the boat so that you start to go to starboard. Start making your turn as you come in. Remember, we want to go as slow as possible. This maneuver, we basically want minimal forward speed, as slow as possible. So you start to make your turn. once you've gone into the turn, throttle into reverse, just enough to, kick the stern of the boat around. You don't want to full throttle into reverse and start to get momentum backwards. You just want to keep the boat where it is and pivot. So we'll throttle forward, start the turn, go neutral, reverse, just enough. Maybe I put 2 seconds, 2-3 seconds, just enough to keep the stern kicking around. As you see the stern kicking around, go back into forward, just a touch forward, and then just continue that process, and you'll notice the boat just continue to pivot and pivot around. And then once you've hit your desired heading, then obviously throttle forward, continue on your way. So for the left-handed prop, you would make your turn to port, but start on the right side of the fairway. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't have a picture for this one, but if you want a little bit more information, feel free to shoot in the Q&A or shoot me an email afterwards, and I can make up some drawings if that's more helpful. And then springing off a dock. So this maneuver is really helpful if you have boats docked fore and aft of you. I don't have it in this picture just for simplicity's sake, but let's say your boat's kind of parallel parked. You don't have a lot of room to maneuver and kind of get the bow out or anything like that. Springing off the dock is going to be a really nice alternative. So the setup process is to run a spring line from the bow to a cleat on the dock that's right about amidship, and then to place a fender basically on the bow quarter where the shroud is. So once you have that prepped, we're going to turn the rudder so that we would turn the boat into the dock. So a little bit unintuitive, but we want to turn the bow into the dock, idle into forward gear, which will kick using that spring line. We're going to fight against the spring line. We'll kick the stern away from the dock. So we'll continue that till our stern is clear of the boat that's astern of us. And then we can throttle into reverse, back away, drop that spring line, pull the fender up, and steer off away out of there. So the key to this one is to have your spring line tight, and you're going to fight against that to pivot the boat around that fender. And finally, backing out of a slip in a crosswind. So a lot of times where we sail, the prevailing wind is coming down the fairway. So as we back out, we can get kind of blown in a number of directions. So backing out in a crosswind, again, we would tie a bow line from the very bow to the last cleat on the dock, or as far back on the dock as we can. If it's really windy, you don't really want to be shy with the throttle. Keep your throttle up, back the boat out so that your stern has traction and will go in the direction that you want. So in this scenario, we want to turn the boat so that the stern goes that way, and we end up heading in this direction here. So we tie the line off, throttle in reverse, give it good throttle, good traction, get the stern to go upwind, and then as the bow clears the end of the finger docks, we can let this line go and let the bow get pushed down by the wind, and that'll turn the boat and we can motor off that way. If we wanted to turn and head out that way, obviously we wouldn't need that bow line. You could just let the stern get blown down and then throttle forward. So that would be a much easier situation. But in this scenario, we want to get enough traction, enough speed, power, get the stern to turn upwind, and then let the bow get blown down. If you don't get that traction in the stern, your stern will get blown downwind, and then basically your whole boat will end up kind of on the corner of this finger dock here, and it's kind of a nightmare that you see quite often. So kind of the big takeaway for this one, maybe you don't back out in a crosswind a lot of times, but really using your docking lines to your advantage, and helping you turn the boat, helping you get the boat back in the slip if you're in a big crosswind. That's kind of the big takeaway I wanted for this one, was that don't be afraid to wrap a dock line around a piling or a cleat and really use it to get the boat in the position that you want it. And so I kept it kind of short tonight. We're at about a half hour now. So thank you all for attending. Let's see some questions if you have any. Okay, so Michael Hogan, if you're still on with us, you asked where would you want to attach the spring line on the boat? Let me know which scenario you're referring to because I didn't see that when you sent it before. And then, can you use steering to compensate if you have a right-hand spin on the prop? Yes, so in forward, you'll rarely notice your prop walk just because you're using the rudder to compensate for that. In reverse, it's more noticeable if you leave your rudder center line. So your rudder is going to be more efficient, or less efficient, sorry, in reverse. So you can compensate to some extent, but the goal is really to use prop walk to your advantage. So rather than trying to fight it, if you can use it to help you, all the better. But yes, you can, most boats, you can fight it with your rudder. It usually just makes your life a little bit harder. After your presentation, can we go back to the docking with a motor screen? That was from an anonymous viewer. Let me know which docking. Do you want just the general steps or one of the specific approaches? Coming into a slip going upwind. So spring lines, you can have a forward spring or an aft spring. Aft spring on your boat, you basically want them tied off midship. Aft spring would come aft, forward spring would go forward. Your spring line going aft is going to help prevent the boat from moving forward in the slip. And then the spring line that you have tied off that then runs forward prevents the boat from coming backward. So if you want to use the spring line to slow you down, tie it off midship, wrap it around something aft. So as you pass the piling coming into the slip or pass a cleat, wrap it around the cleat, hold it on the boat so that you can take up any slack or pay out if you need to. And then your forward throttling will fight that spring line and eventually stop the boat. Hopefully that answered it. Okay. So it looks like that was it for the questions. We can go ahead and stop for tonight. If you think of anything or if you watch the recording once it's posted on the Navionics website, any questions at all, or if you have a specific event that happened, go ahead and shoot me an email. Try to describe it as much as possible, and I will try to get back to you. Can sometimes be terrible at replying if I'm out on the water for long periods. So if I haven't responded in a few days, feel free to bombard me with more emails. Oh, hold on, we got one more. Regarding moving a slip in a crosswind. Okay, so let's go to the screen here. So the question was, moving out of a slip in a crosswind, what if we wished for the bow to be facing upwind? So basically come out of the slip and head in that direction. That's a much easier approach than what I was explaining. So in that scenario, we can use the wind to our advantage to blow the stern down. So as you start to back out of the slip, you don't necessarily have to compensate as much to turn the boat. I would put a fender, especially a roaming fender, so you can move it as the boat continues to back out, just right along the back edge of that dock. Designate a crew member to hold it and walk forward on the boat as you continue to back out, just to keep it there and protect the boat. But as you back out, the stern will get blown down into that direction. And then once your bow is clear, you can go ahead, throttle forward, give it a lot of throttle because you're going to be fighting against the wind, and then turn the boat up into the wind that way. Wind tends to blow your bow around instead of the stern. Are you backed bow in first or stern in first? But so let's say we are bow in this scenario. So let's say you're backing out and the bow is just getting blown into this dock here. We can just take this spring line and put it over. Let me change the color here and make it a little less confusing. Put put that spring line over to the other dock and hold the bow of the boat up into this area as you back out and let the wind blow the stern down. Hopefully that makes sense. Wonderful. Okay, so doesn't look like there's any other questions right now. Again, if you think of anything, feel free to send me an email. I will go back to that last screen, put that up. One more question. Power coming into a slip with an onshore wind, you have to back to find your slip, and there's another boat in the further slip. Terry, I'm not sure I completely understand your question. Why don't you go ahead and send me an email, and we can have back and forth discussion there. I'll try to sort out exactly what it is you're asking there. But for tonight, we can go ahead and let everybody else go and have a good night. Maybe watch the Republican debate if that's what you're into. So good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Check in on the Navionics webinar schedule for any fishing, any more sailing webinars. There'll be some email blasts that come out. So yeah, thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.